Welcome to your Time Management Revolution. This is Time Management Fixer Helene Segura. In today's episode, I'll be sharing a previously recorded interview during which we're discussing time management and mind management. Enjoy.
470. Myers Financial, located at 670 West Napa Street in Sonoma. Myers Financial is a boutique wealth management firm. So whether you need personal or business financial management, wealth management, tax planning, or income tax preparation, Myers Financial is here to help. For more information, you can call Lillian at 800-734-1124 or visit their website at myersfinancial.com. Larbre Automotive. Tina Schoen, Broker Associate, Sotheby's International Realty, located on the beautiful Sonoma Plaza. Tina Schoen is a professional real estate broker in wine country real estate acquisitions and sales. She and her team of professionals work in all categories and price ranges to market your property internationally and find you the right property to fit your needs. For more information regarding wine country real estate, you may call Tina at 707-933-1515 or visit her website at realestate-sonomavalley.com. Krista Grant Insurance Services, located at 255 West Napa Street, Suite F. They offer insurance for home, auto, life, commercial businesses, farm, and vineyard properties, and AARP. For more information, you can call 707-938-4998, or you can visit their website at grantoninsurance.com.
Kenwood Education Foundation is presenting their first annual summer golf tournament, being held at the Oakmont Golf Club on Friday, August 12th. Fun, games for families, first-time players, kids, and serious golfers, too. The cost of education is rising, and important programs such as art, library, music, physical ed, and many more are at risk each year. Please show your support by donating to their first annual summer golf tournament or plan to attend all the fun and games at Oakmont Golf Club Friday, August 12th. Contact KenwoodEducationFoundation.org or call 707-294-6081 for more information.
Welcome to Health Matters, Sonoma's weekly program devoted to health and well-being. Each week, through interviews, editorials, and listener participation, we will explore topics and issues of contemporary medicine and its relationship to the lifestyles of our community. Our goal is to provide you with information and resources to help you achieve and maintain what you deserve, a happy, healthy, and productive life. I'm your host, Dr. Ned Hoke, a veteran in natural methods healthcare, speaking with you today from Sonoma Valley, California. We're here each Wednesday at this time for an hour of health topic digestion and discussion. Please stay with us. And welcome back to Health Matters. Thank you for tuning in again this lovely Sonoma Thursday. Today we're going to be joined by Helene Segura, and she's written a text called The Inefficiency Assassin, which doesn't sound like something we would do on Health Matters, but regular listeners know that we commonly, or not uncommonly, I should say, have people who've written on how to sort of organize things. I guess probably because that's a big hole in my own capacity, or not my capacity, but my own achievement. In terms of I have a desk full of papers, and so I guess every so often when I have the opportunity, I guess to really confess, I need these lessons myself in terms of how to make sense out of personal organization and business planning organization. And it's striking to me how frequently there are things out there that are really worth reading about and thinking about. And Helene Segura, as one of those people who's, for me, has given me some good insights, and I think she'll be able to give us some good insights. So please be ready with your questions. Be prepared. Our call-in number, again, is 707-933-9133 for our callers. And if you want to get with us, probably after about 10 or 15 minutes of the program, you'll be welcome and be invited to call and ask your question. She's very organized, as you might imagine. And so that would be a good thing for all of us to share and talk about our struggles to make sense of our lives in terms of our planning, in terms of our time management. The second part of the program, we'll be reading, actually. We'll start one of our reading projects. And there's a book called Endless Energy, The Essential Guide to Energy Health by Deborah Green. And basically, I'm just going to pick this up as soon as we are finished with Helene and talk about energy efficiency. And here we go. Welcome to Health Matters. Hello.
Hi, Ned. This is Helene.
Yes, it is. Well, we're happy.
How are you?
We're happy that you're joining us. I didn't have quite enough time to get all that I wanted to get in about you before you showed up, but we're actually happy to have you, and you'll be able to do it for us.
Okay, great.
Okay, so this book that you have, The Inefficiency Assassin, Time Management Tactics for Working Smarter, Not Longer, looks like it has a lot of goals that are goals that are, it comes off as a sort of a time management project, but it has a lot about personal life organization as well. So it really is it's a really broad, for me, it's a broad gauged text on kind of life management in general, and it seems like the time management part of it, even as dominant as that is in your presentation, it seems to be almost that sort of is the carrier of a whole lot of other things that you sort of good advice and strategic thinking and so on that you. So, was the business focus and the intention around that sort of as a marketing, but not marketing? I don't mean that. Was that an intention to sort of plug it into the business community as its sort of primary audience, or help me understand kind of what audiences you were seeking in addition to the business community?
Sure. Well, the majority of the clients who I work with are business clients, and what I found is that even though they hired me to help them with time management related to work, our work and life are getting very integrated. It's really hard to draw this black and white line between the two different components. And so that's why there is quite a bit of life management in there, because we can't function at work if our personal life is spinning out of control, and then we can't function in our personal life if our work life is spinning out of control. So that's the reason why that integration is in there, because this entire book is what I go through with my clients on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Well, very late in the book, you tell us about work-life balance, and you talk about how that work-life balance came into our vocabulary, and that became the idea of a perfect balance. There was, 1/3 of work, 1/3 of family or personal life, and 1/3 sleep. And so what you've just told us is the sort of modern version, or that is the evolved version, which is, it sounds like 1/3 is sleep, and then 2/3 is this mixture that you just described, is the integration of life and business life as well as personal life. And you make a point, or several times in the text, of talking about how it's inescapable that our personal life and our business life are in the same time period are thrown together in such a way that it's unavoidable that we have to find a way of combining them in an efficient way. So maybe you could say a little bit more about how you evolved into, or as you give guidance to people, particularly who work in a full-on business environment where the company wants to own that 8 hours or whatever number of hours of your time. How do you explain in that environment how the personal life and the business life really has to kind of coexist because?
Right. Well, it is up to the employer, because they dictate how you're supposed to use your time throughout the day.
Right.
And yes, that 8 hours or 9 hours or 10 hours, however long your shift is,
right,
technically belongs to the employer. But if you have an open-minded employer, they understand that the typical human being cannot work for 8 or 9 or 10 hours straight. There has to be some kind of break in there. And that break can be used for something that's personal. If you need to take an hour and a half for lunch instead of just an hour because you need to squeeze in a doctor's appointment, or if you need to use a 5-minute break to take a phone call that you've been putting off, something needs to be arranged at your house. So it's not like you are avoiding work and you're not completing your work and you're spending 4 hours of your shift on personal items, but instead it's understanding that there do need to be some breaks throughout the business day, and during those breaks, it is okay if you handle some personal matters.
Right. Well, you other places you also talk about how the average American worker loses up to 3 hours a day during the distractions, interruptions, poor concentration, and overwhelming to-do lists. So, in a sense, even if the person were absolutely strapped to their desk and their smartphone was locked in their drawer, and the phone was unavailable except for business calls, they're still going to be in trouble a lot of the time because, as you say, so much of the time our personal organization is not at a high enough level to really to give our attention, to give our full attention, and to our productivity needs. So, what your book is trying to do is at least give us a lot of very detailed steps. So let's talk about some of those steps, because you start off, or that is, you talk about there's some sections. The first one is, or part one is create clarity, and the second one is implement structure and flow. The third one is assemble your team, CIA, you call it. So maybe we could let our listeners kind of have a taste of what you're doing. So if we could grab sort of some of the important elements out of each of those sections. So let's start with create clarity, if you would.
Sure. With creating clarity, the first thing to realize is that time management is truly all about mind management. And so if your brain is not clear, if your brain can't make good decisions about how you need to use your time, well, your time's just going to fly out the window and you'll be totally stressed out because you're constantly behind. So that's why it's absolutely critical that you create clarity. And so to create clarity, you want to establish what your top work priorities are and what your top personal priorities are, because the more you understand what it is that you are living for and working toward, the more likely you are to stay focused. You'll be able to ask yourself, is doing this task right in front of me, is that going to support one of my personal priorities or one of my work priorities? It will help you make those better decisions. And then also, within creating clarity, you want to identify your targets. Too many times when my clients are listing off their goals, they'll say something like, I would like to spend more time with my kids, or I would like to have higher sales. Well, that's great, but how do you measure it? So we need to make sure that we have quantifiable, measurable targets. In other words, numbers. That way we know how far or how close we are. Because sometimes we get really down on ourselves because we think we haven't done enough. But because we don't have this quantifiable target, we don't realize how close we are, and we're really not that far away. And then another part of creating clarity is making sure you practice self-care. Because if you don't take care of this body that houses your brain, then you won't be able to make those good decisions about how you use your time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's, of course, given that we're a healthcare program, of course, the self-care part particularly, grabbed our attention. And you talk a lot about sleep appropriately, and about how getting adequate sleep is just absolutely critical. And you give the sort of standard the suggestions about turning off all electronic 30 minutes before going to bed, and use a real alarm clock instead of the phone. Go to bed at least 7 or 8 hours before you need to be awake, which is an interesting way of framing that, in terms of, because of course it's so easy to, it's so often we'll push on, we'll say, well, we're having such fun, if we call it fun, or we're using downtime to sort of whatever it is, our computer thing at home, or we're watching the late news or whatever it is, and we forget that we need so many hours before we need to be awake. So that's a nice way,
Right.
a nice way of framing that. And then the idea of eating nothing and drinking nothing but warm water, but put 2 hours before the bedtime. That's again a fairly standard suggestion, and yet how many people actually think of doing it? I mean, it's like one of those sort of standards, but it's so many people are snacking and sipping and sort of chewing really on their way to the bed, not realizing that, of course, that in some way is disturbing their sleep cycle. They're not being able to get the depths of the sleep they need. So that's a kind of an important piece. And you talk also about walking. Talk about walking. Now, you are just by the way, for our listeners who wouldn't know you, that you've been an athlete, and when one looks at the way you write like as I would imagine an athlete would write. That is, you write with a lot of positivity. You write with a lot of it's kind of almost a sense of rhythm that an athlete would have. It's the vigor of your sentences don't sag in the middle. You're running 100-yard and you're all out, 100-yard dash and you're all out the whole 100 yards, and so it is quite, just, and sort of as an aside, it feels like quite an athletic way of expressing yourself, shall we say. But let's come back to walking. Speaking of athletics, talk about walking a little bit and how that's such an important element.
Well, walking is so beneficial in many ways. If you talk to a cardiologist, they're going to tell you that walking is going to increase your blood circulation. And since so many of us now are in sedentary jobs, or we have these electronic devices and we just sit there glued to our devices, we don't get as much exercise as we used to several decades ago. So walking is going to increase the circulation. Mm-hmm. If you talk to a pulmonologist, walking is absolutely great for the lungs because it helps us increase the oxygen capacity in our lungs. Now, that's critical because both having the blood flow and having the oxygen is key to having a healthier brain. And since time management is all about mind management, we need that healthy brain. Now, neurologists have found that when somebody walks, they increase the creative capacity of the brain. In other words, we're able to do better work and problem solve after we've gone for a walk or while we are walking. So just from taking a few steps, going on a walk for 5 minutes during the day, that is going to not only better your health, but it's also going to increase your productivity because your brain will function better.
Mm-hmm. Well, you say that neuroscience and educational psychology had really opened a door for you, or you used the word light bulb. A light bulb went off in your brain. Maybe this is a good moment to talk about, since we're talking about the vitality of our physical form. Let's just change a little bit and talk about the vitality of your own perception. You'd been a teacher for a number of years, and then you were in graduate school, and you say that when you realized that neuroscience and educational psychology were sort of formal, but when you understood what they might do for you and how that provided a sort of a platform of thought for you, maybe help us into that idea a little bit and talk about how lively that was for you and kind of how significant that is behind the whole structure of what you write about.
Sure. Well, I'd like to backtrack even more and go back to my high school days. In high school, I struggled in my classes.
Right.
My parents wanted me in the college prep classes, so I was in advanced placement and honors classes, and I was always at the bottom of the grade list because I didn't realize it at the time, but I didn't know how to study based on my brain type. So school was such a chore, and in college it was the same way until I took some educational psychology classes and started learning about the brain. And then in grad school, it just completely opened up my mind studying neuroscience and ed psych and behavior change, because I realized that the reason why things were hard for me is because I was battling against my brain type. And once I understood how I think and what my learning style is and what my working style is, it just became so much easier to grasp information, and that's part of what led to being more efficient, because I always used to feel like I was spinning my wheels. I would get things done on time, but I would just have to work so much harder, it seemed, than everybody else to get there. So once I realized that, hey, I am a combination of visual and kinesthetic. That means I like to learn through seeing things, and I like to learn through writing notes or being able to put something together. I was able to learn how to study that way. I learned that I'm a morning person, and I have high-level functioning brain in the morning and not so much in the afternoon or evening. So I understand that if I have to work in the late afternoon or evening and have a client session or give a talk, I have to be so much more conscious and aware of what's happening. I have to be on a higher alert because I know that's my lower brain level time. So just by studying how the brain works, it's so much easier to be efficient and not have to work as hard to get things done.
Well, you do make that point, and in several different ways. And I think, again, for our listeners' benefit, you might say just a little bit more about those styles, those brain types, the right brain, creative. Say more about the solution tactics, the solution strategists. To help us with some of those categories, if you would. And so our listeners who are maybe not familiar with that sort of style description, maybe that could give them some insight in terms of where they are in the world.
Sure. Well, depending on which research you read, there can be as many as 40 different brain types. So I'm just going to narrow it down to 3 basic ones. You have your visual learners, which means you intake things through sight. You have auditory learners, which means you prefer to intake by listening. And then you have kinesthetic learners. That means you like to have your hand on things. You like to put things together or take them apart in order to learn. So once you start paying attention to how you learn and operate better, then you can decide, wow, if I am a visual learner, then it's really important that I have a very clear workspace so I can see what it is that I need to work on. And I could be visually distracted. So if I have too many knickknacks in my workspace, that can actually work against me. So maybe I should cut it down to half. Or if you're a visual learner, you might be distracted by auditory. So that means you're distracted by sounds. So maybe if you work in a loud office, you need to wear your own set of headphones so you can work in your own little world, listening to music without words, something that's not as distracting as everything else that's around you. Mm-hmm. If you're an auditory learner, then it's very important that you're in a place where you can hear everything that it is that you need to hear. So if you tend to use the cell phone a lot and you have really bad reception on your cell phone, if you're an auditory learner, that's not a great way to intake information for you if that's your primary source. So you may want to switch to a landline or to a better cell phone, because if you're auditory, you need as much of that intake as possible. Mm-hmm. And then if you're kinesthetic, you might be the person who sits in a meeting who's tapping his or her foot all the time or tapping the pencil because you just need to move around. And that could be distracting to your coworkers who are auditory or visual. So they see movement and they're distracted by movement, or they're distracted by the sound you make. So you might be the one who needs to get up in a meeting and walk around or stand up against the wall in the back of the room. So that way there's a little bit of movement for you, and you can function better in that meeting. However, let me just forewarn the kinesthetic learners out there, if you decide that you need to move around and you know this ahead of time, make sure you tell the presenter. That way they don't get distracted by you fidgeting. So that's why I always tell, when I'm in a small training group, I tell everybody, if you need to get up and stand up against the back wall, please go ahead and do so, because I know that also helps my ADHD clients to do that. So by realizing that there are these different brain types, you can start to pay more attention to how you intake your information. And you can make adjustments when you know that the intake isn't going to come in your style. And so that way you can still absorb this knowledge and this information around you that you're required to do.
Thank you. That's a really nice, efficient description, speaking of efficiency. We are speaking with Helene Segura. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, sir.
Helene Segura, the author of The Inefficiency Assassin. Helene, we need to take a public service break. Please stay with us and also our listeners, and we'll be back with you in just a moment.
Hey, Jack, you got a sec? Jack, your hair's on fire.
Yeah, I know. I just need to finish this sales report and then I'll lie down for a bit.
But shouldn't I?
No, I'll be fine.
You wouldn't ignore this, so why ignore the signs of a stroke? If you or someone you know suddenly has trouble speaking, seeing, or walking, call 911 right away, because time lost is brain lost. To find out more, visit www.strokeassociation.org or call 1-888-4STROKE. This message brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
Programming for KSVY is brought to you in part by Myers Financial, Body Best Collision Center, Tina Schoen, Broker Associate, Sotheby's, Krista Granton Insurance Services.
And welcome back to Health Matters. Dr. Ned Hoke today joined by Helene Segura and her book called The Inefficiency Assassin. And we're talking about, obviously, some of the contents of this book. And you describe yourself, Helene, as a productivity coach. So maybe if we should just define productivity for our clients, for our listeners, I should say, and then talk about kind of how is a productivity coach this seems to be kind of a new wrinkle. I mean, there's a lot of coaching going on out there, but the productivity coach, it seems to be sort of a new, partly a new wrinkle. So talk about that, if you would, a little bit.
Well, the dictionary defines productivity or efficiency as capable of producing desired results without wasting materials, time, or energy. Now, my personal definition of productivity is you are able to work at your own pace and live the life the way you want to, everything on your terms. So in other words, things are planned ahead, and even when things go wrong, you can still manage to get back into order and get done what you need to get done. Now, as far as the productivity coach, there's a terminology that floats around out there that a lot of people aren't familiar with. They hear the words, but they're not completely sure about what they mean. There's coaching and there's consulting. A coach is somebody who will ask very deep questions and help their client formulate the answers and come up with their own solutions. So there's some very deep learning that's going on. Versus a consultant is brought in to give recommendations. And so what I do is a combination of both coaching and consulting, because since most of my clients struggle with time, they don't want to take that long to get to the deep learning. So there's consulting thrown in with recommendations, but at certain points during our sessions, I flip into coaching mode, so that way they are helping to generate their solutions, which means there's going to be deeper learning. Mm-hmm. And productivity, that term has been around for several decades, and there have been productivity coaches around like David Allen for more than 20 years, but I think it's rising to the surface so much, especially in the last 5 years or so, because we just seem to be moving at such a fast pace now with technology and all of this visual stimulation and devices floating around us. Everybody seems to be going at such a fast pace and never getting to where they want to go. So I think that's why productivity and the term time management, that's really rising up in the lingo, because it's now become such a concern to so many more people, and not just the CEO level, the C-suite.
Well, the other thing is that, as I recall, the sort of time management sort of started to be sort of an industrial product that sort of put together the assembly line process kind of situations. And I think some of our older listeners, possibly, I don't know about the younger listeners, but some of our older listeners probably identify time management in a sort of a top-down motif where basically it's getting widgets to joining other widgets. So it's in a manufacturing process. So it's been regarded and is still regarded in certainly in the manufacturing area in the minds of some, at least, that it's really a torture technique almost, in a sense of demanding certain amount of production in a certain amount of time. And so what separates what you've written, which is so built around, for my reading anyway, so built around achieving harmony with your inner life, with your personal goals as well as your business and professional goals. Yours is so much more almost a life examination coaching project rather than that heavy-handed sort of top-down time management sort of, shoving the manufacturing process along faster and faster, kind of, so to speak. So I guess I sort of wondered a little bit about the time management language, because of course, but at the same time you're very explicit in your book. I mean, it's perfectly obvious as soon as you pick it up, you're talking about time management and efficiency and inefficiency as being things that are really sort of elemental in terms of sort of losing, instead of losing money and losing, creating misery for ourselves, that the story you tell inspires us to believe that by mind management, which you're very forthrightly declaring, by mind management and personal organization, we really can begin to achieve the not only our professional and personal professional goals, but also our personal goals. And that the way you frame it is that it's kind of like almost like growing up in a way. This is like something that really maybe should have been taught to us when we were in high school, certainly in college, where, I mean, I don't know what you got in college, but I certainly didn't get any of that. And I went to medical school, and it was, we didn't learn that there were different mind and brain types and different personal strategy types and so on. So really what you're offering is at least to me, and for me, as I read it, is sort of a graduate course in kind of things that I would have liked to have gotten when I was much younger. So given that you've been a teacher, forgive me for being long-winded, given that you've been a teacher, how do you see this, or do you see this as a set of skills and a set of possibilities that could be organized for an academic and school environment? And maybe you could say a little bit about that, if you would.
Oh, absolutely. And I totally agree with you that it would be wonderful if these skills are taught in schools. And coming from the teacher background, I was a teacher for 11 years in a Title I district. And what I've discovered, not just from my former district, but districts across the U.S., so much of the curriculum is driven by standardized tests, because in order for the students to show that they've excelled, they need to score well on these exams. Well, organizing and time management are not subjects that are going to be tested on these exams. Therefore, they're not going to be taught at school. And if they're not taught at school, that means kids need to learn it at home. And not everybody has a brain that's wired to know how to teach organizing and time management. So I think it's absolutely critical that kids learn this even before they get to college, but if they haven't learned it by then, definitely during college. And so the way that I've written the book, while it is geared to professionals, recent graduates from college can pick up the book and understand it as well. They may not be able to apply all of the business examples in there, but so much of what I mentioned is still going on in their lives with email and paper management and digital file management. They can definitely get into that there. But there are some great student organizing books out there that are specific for students who are in elementary school and grade school. There are some wonderful resources out there. So if any of your listeners are parents who have younger children, it is never too early to start teaching your kids about organizing and time management.
Well, maybe you'd be kind enough to even you've given me the beginning of what I was sort of reaching for. Do you have any particular guidance, unique particular guidance for either an author or the book title, or because I think this is such a totally missed step for our educational system. I too have been a teacher, although many years ago, but still, it seems to me like such a thing that's important. So do you have any particular guidance that you would choose to offer?
There is one author, her name is Leslie Joselle, and she has materials and workbooks for the organized student. And there's a certified professional organizer named Kathy Jenkins, and she also has a program as well. Mm-hmm. And there is a third author whose name escapes me right now, but I want to say the title of her book is The Organized Student. Mm-hmm. And if that name pops back up into my brain later, I will definitely let you know. But there are resources that are out there. Maybe I can put it on my website as well, so that way if I think of it later, your listeners can pop in there and take a look.
I'd be delighted. And the thing is that I guess because we our program does sort of happen right after school is out, so a lot of our listeners tend to become parents on the way to pick up their kids, and also people who are involved in the school life, and so that this is a particular interest of ours here at Health Matters. So now coming back to the issue of the procrastination as opportunity's natural assassin. Let's dive into that a little bit and talk about procrastination and kind of how you see it as being as powerful as it is, and what give us a couple of steps that would be appropriate to begin to come to grips with it.
Psychologists define procrastination as the act of wanting to feel better now. And who doesn't want to feel better now? But that's the reason why procrastination is part of our human nature. We always want to do something that's fun or that's enjoyable, which is why if there is a decision that's put in front of us that is going to be tough for us to make, or we have a task in front of us that we don't know how to do, or we find it boring, or we quite frankly just don't want to do it, that's when procrastination tends to set in. So the first key in battling procrastination is, number one, catching yourself. Unfortunately, many of us operate on autopilot. We just kind of go throughout the day and don't really know how we wound up somewhere, but all of a sudden we're here. If we become much more present in every moment during the day, we'll be able to catch ourselves saying, oh, wait a minute, I am going into procrastination mode. And then the key question you'll then want to ask yourself is, how will delaying this decision or delaying working on the task, how will that benefit me? Mm-hmm. Now, if it truly will benefit you, then it's not procrastinating. You can move on to something else because it wasn't important. But if it's not going to benefit you, that's telling you, I just need to get this done and over with. Or let's say that the procrastination is caused because you don't know how to do something. Well, let's look at how to get around that. Can you ask somebody in your life who you already know for help on this? Can you hire somebody else to do it? Can you barter with your friend? Or can you go to the mighty Google machine and look it up and see if you can learn how to do it there? So you want to face procrastination as often as possible and work your way through that task or decision. However, since we are human, we will not be able to battle procrastination 100% of the time. So your plan B is to procrastinate productively. What else is on your list that you need to get done that you could use to procrastinate on whatever's in front of you? So let's say that I have to make this huge presentation to 500 people, and I have no idea of what I want to present. And there are different parts of my project that I need to come up with. First, I need to decide on what are the main talking points. I need to come up with graphics, and then I need to come up with some stories to tell. Well, if I don't know what graphics I want to use, maybe I can work on the stories. Or if I don't know what stories to tell, I can work on my key points. So there are different parts of the project that I could work on. Or if this is something at home, let's say that you don't want to do the laundry. Well, what's something else you can do if you don't want to do the laundry? Maybe you can go do the dishes instead. So you're doing something that's still productive. That's why you can procrastinate productively. What most of us do when we procrastinate, we tend to reach for our electronic devices and go into social media and lose ourselves for 10 minutes or maybe an hour. So that's not procrastinating productively. That's just true procrastination, and that usually doesn't get us anywhere.
Well, that, of course, is when those of us who walk outside and see everybody peering down at their smartphone. It's just staggering to think of the number of hours that people are invested in doing whatever it is that's happening with their smartphone. I mean, one can never necessarily assume that one knows what's going on, if it's Pokemon or whatever. But it's certainly, there's an awful lot of eyes on these little devices, and so what you're saying is that, as you're reminding us that probably a good deal of that time is truly procrastination, and in a sense, it's robbing us really of achieving some of the really important goals that we have in our lives. And so I guess it's almost like drinking too many sugary beverages, or I mean, it could really be it seems to me a sort of an epidemic of a problem. And so I guess for those people who want to get beyond that, or want to be able to embrace a sort of a larger sense of their purpose in their life, I mean, that would be one of the places they'd really have to come to grips with some limitations. So what you say, I think very sensibly, you say, well, you put the tempting apps in the back, so that when your smartphone lights up, the app that you would sort of procrastinate with is sort of in the back, so that you have to go find it if you wanted to. If you want to actually engage in procrastination, so you don't do it automatically. I thought that was a wonderful idea.
Oh, thank you. And that also gives you the time to get off autopilot and become present and realize, I am about to procrastinate. Do I really want to do this? So it's going to take you some effort to procrastinate if you're going to move those apps off your home screen and onto the back screen.
You've got a wonderful chapter on a presentation on how to sort of delouse almost an overwhelmed office with the piles of papers every which way, and delousing seems like a good way of saying it. So, and you also have a phrase called "kicking chaos to the curb," which let's take a minute, but let's be sure our listeners know that we are receiving calls. Should anybody wish to visit with Helene Segura and her book called The Inefficiency Assassin, or they want to share a story or get some guidance, please feel free to give us a call. Health Matters, 707-933-9133 till the end of the hour. So let's go to the kicking chaos to the curb. What does that mean, and kind of how is that influential in terms of your work as such?
That phrase came about when I was taking a marketing class, and I was told that I needed to come up with some kind of tagline that was enticing, and they presented different examples of how you can be enticing, and one of them was alliteration. And I had used the term kick chaos to the curb before because kicking, I used to be a soccer player, and I am kinesthetic, so I enjoy action, so I like the kick. And so many of my clients are in chaos. So let's kick that chaos to the curb. And that just becomes the overarching theme of what we're trying to do in bettering ourselves with time management and productivity. We do want to kick that chaos to the curb. And even though the title of my book is quite aggressive, The Inefficiency Assassin, that's balanced with the goal of peace that's inside, because that's what most of my clients are searching for. They just want more peace in their lives. And how can they achieve that peace? By kicking chaos to the curb and bettering their efficiency and their time management.
It's a lovely idea. We need to take one last break, so please stay with us. We're talking to Helene Segura, the Inefficiency Assassin. We'll be back with you in just a moment. Please stay tuned.
Programming for KSVY is brought to you in part by Larbre Automotive, Myers Financial, Tina Schoen, Broker Associate, Sotheby's, Krista Granton Insurance Services. This health moment is brought to you in part by Sonoma Valley Hospital.
Learning to flip your thoughts can have a profound impact on your health and well-being. The simplest way is through a positive affirmation that flips the thought from a negative to a positive. For example, when faced with chores, instead of saying, I don't want to clean the house, say, I like living in a clean house. When getting up the motivation to exercise, instead of saying, I'm too tired to exercise today, say, I feel more alert and energetic when I exercise. Positive affirmations help us change our negative attitudes into positive ones.
Well, how's that health moment for just plugged right into where we are and what we've been talking about? So, what a good fit that was. So, Helene, as we getting down to the end here, so let's talk about products and productivity products. You one of the things you talk about in your book is about going to product expos where people show up with stuff and they have different ways of filing systems and that kind of thing. So how significant do you feel those kinds of products can be? And maybe you could give us some suggestions on product use and how to begin to think about that, perhaps in a way that our listeners perhaps might not have themselves been able to think.
I think that products are important tools, but they are not. They're not going to save you. In other words, you need to work on the planning and the structuring of your day first, because the more structured you are with your day, then the more time you have for fun. But these products can help you in the long run be even more efficient once you have that structured day. Mm-hmm. There are calendars out there, either in paper form or digital format, that you can utilize in order to help you be more efficient. So what you'd first want to decide is, would you prefer to be paper-based or digital-based, or you can be a hybrid. A lot of my clients are digitally based, and what I found when they use a digital calendar is that they are just looking at these little colored dots on this very small screen, and they're not able to see what's happening before a proposed day and time and after, and they end up scheduling things that they shouldn't because they can't see the big picture. So if they're digitally inclined, I ask them to use a digital calendar where they can increase the size of the screen and be able to see at least a full day at a time, if not a complete week. And if they can only see the full day, be able to scroll back and forth to see what's happening before or after to make sure it's a good fit for that day and time. And then for folks who prefer paper, I encourage them to think about how much detail they need to see in their calendars. Quite a few of the female clients I have do not want to carry around this monstrous calendar in their purses, and that's totally understandable. I don't want a backache either, but they end up carrying a calendar that's too small. It's just a monthly calendar, and they can't fit in all of the obligations that they have, and so they can't read their calendar. So I recommend that they go with at least a weekly view. It will be slightly larger, but as long as they carry a purse that's bigger than a clutch, they'll be able to fit at least a week at a view calendar in there. There are also task apps that can be used, and there are so many out there. There's not a perfect one. What you'd want to do is decide what are the top maybe 3 to 5 benefits you want to have from a task app, and then you can do your shopping once it is you know what you want. But some popular ones are Toodle-Do and Remember the Milk, and there are some that come standard on phones. And they're also built into contact relationship management systems or CRM systems for any of the professionals listening to the call. If you're using a CRM system, you can also look to see if it already has a task system that you can implement in there, so that way you don't have to use 2 separate systems. And another quick app I wanted to share is for people who have to schedule meetings, either in-person meetings or virtual meetings, instead of sending out 1,000 emails with people hitting reply all, oh, I can do this day, or no, I can't do this day, there's an app called Doodle, Doodle, Doodle.com. It's free, and what you can do is type in the dates and the times that you propose, and people take a vote on which day and time will work best for them, and then you can just take the so-called winner of the vote. And that saves so much time and also keeps those emails out of your inbox. So that's a great app to use.
A great app.
There are a lot of tools out there, but it's important to know what it is you want to gain, and then you can go purchase that filing system or that calendar, whatever it is that you want.
One of the other joyous things that you offer in the book to me is you talk about, in your chapter on multitasking, you say, No, basically, you say single task, and you talk about 15-minute blocks, and you talk about, and I'm not giving anywhere near enough attention to to the time structure that you've offered in terms of the teaching. But maybe with the remaining time that we have, maybe we could talk about time blocks, and we could talk about how you're going from recognizing the desirability of going from multitasking to single tasking.
Well, multitasking basically just turns our brain into mush. Studies show that when we work on one task at a time, both the right and left lobes of the brain are working together on that single task. When we pick up a second task, the brain splits in half. Half the brain is working on one task, half is working on another. If we try to throw in a third task, we basically just get completely discombobulated and nearly completely shut down. There was a study done by the University of Glasgow, and when I first saw the media headline, I was really excited because it said, "Scientific proof, women multitask better than men." I thought, yes, we've won the battle of the sexes. And then I went into the research only to find that when women multitask, their productivity drops by only 69%, versus men, when they multitask, their productivity drops by 74%. So the media took it as the women won, but I took it as, oh my gosh, do you see how much productivity drops when you're multitasking?
Wow.
It drops by almost 3/4, whether you're male or female. That's terrible. And when we talk about multitasking, we're not talking about low brain functions like gossiping on the phone while you're stirring a pot of chili. You can do both at the same time. We're talking about higher brain functions where thinking is involved, like carrying on a radio interview while checking email. Now, I promise you I'm not checking email, but those are examples of two high brain functions. There's no way that a person would be able to do both well at the same time, and that's why multitasking does not work. It drives down productivity.
Well, and I think that's very good. It's difficult news for a lot of people because we're all so used to multitasking that the discipline to actually look at the tasks that we're doing and recognizing that they are sufficiently complex or sufficiently mind-needing that we allow them to have their own special time. I think that there's a beauty to that idea, and I'm grateful for that idea. But let's not also miss the other part of the question was you suggest in terms of one of the simple things that you seem to be seemingly simple is dividing tasks up into time blocks. So talk about some of your ideas about share with us some of your ideas about time blocking, and how people can effectuate that in terms of their choices of as they move through their day. They're strategizing for getting their productivity in a better shape, in addition to single tasking, but also talking about the time blocking part.
Mm-hmm. If you look at your to-do list, most of us have a miles-long to-do list. There's so many things on there. And we set ourselves up for failure if we think we're going to get all of that done in one day. Instead, what we want to do is choose those top 3 things that we absolutely need to get done tomorrow so our lives won't be miserable. We take out our calendars and we look to see what we already have scheduled for tomorrow. We already have some time blocks in there because chances are we have some kind of appointment. That's a time block. And what you want to do is once you've chosen your top 3 tasks, think about how long is it going to take me to work on this portion of the task. Is it going to take me maybe 30 minutes to finish it? If so, let's double that. Let's give ourselves a little extra time because we know Murphy's Law, things tend to happen. So you would pad in, instead of 30 minutes, an hour of time. Where would you like to spend that hour of time tomorrow in between what's already scheduled? Do you need to break it apart into 15-minute segments and work on it different times of the day because it's a boring task? Or are you okay with working for a solid hour on it? And so that's a time block. You are allotting time to complete that task. And once you have your tasks scheduled in, you'll be able to realistically see how long your to-do list should actually be for the next day. Maybe you do have time to get 17 of those things done, but most of the time, we only have enough hours in the day to finish maybe 3 or 5 of them because they're a little more complex. And so by using time blocking and estimating how much time you need to spend on these different tasks, number one, you stay focused and you're going to procrastinate less because you realize what you need to get done, so that way you can have more time for fun. And then number two, it helps us become better at future scheduling because we understand how much time we need to allot to things, and we just become a lot more realistic about what we need to spend our time on.
And I think also the joy, as I read it, the joy is that you're, by doing that and by articulating and making more sound that habit is, then when you do switch over to sort of personal goals and personal happiness things that you choose to do for yourself, your sense of not taking time away from other necessary things is much improved because you can really disconnect from, you've gotten your work done presumably, and you've been productive enough. So then that hour or however, or that day, that vacation, whatever it is, that truly can be your time. You've made it to be your time, and the whatever anxiety you may before you became more productive because you still think you should be looking at your phone or should be answering email, that can go away. You can make a choice to step away from that. And of course, that's one of the things that you're giving me from this book is that you're giving me permission to become more efficient and better at what I'm doing, but you're also giving me permission for greater happiness. And so I thank you for that, and I thank you for taking the time for us here at Health Matters.
Well, thank you, Ned. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye. So there we are. And what a book it is. The Inefficiency Assassin, Helene Segura, and Time Management Tactics for Working Smarter, Not Longer. It's a fine book, and I need a lot of it, I should say. And Helene was most generous to spend the time with us today. I said I was going to read from another book, but I was having so much fun talking to Helene, I didn't get to it, so perhaps we'll get to that another time. I should mention to our listeners that I will be going on vacation in much of August and some of September, but next week your regular Dreamweavers segment with Teresa Rousseau will be here. But I'm not sure myself whether I'll be here the rest any of August or some of the beginning of September. So you'll be hearing some rerun programs. So that's how that is. So if you cannot pacify your spirit and you let your mind be complicated with desires and worries, your disease will not be cured. To be healthy, you must avoid anger and worry, keep your mind happy, your heart at ease, and your desires at low levels. That's the basic guidance of the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, the basic book of Chinese medicine. Our Health Matters motto still is, healthcare isn't a noun, it's a verb. So we're happy to have you with us. Tune us in again next week. Until then, I bid you well. At AOL.com. We always love to hear from you. Please tune in again next week at the same time on these issues of genuine importance. And those are Health Matters. Stay tuned for great programming on KSVY.